Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves. Hello and welcome back, everybody. So today we have Dr. Penelope Hsu with us, and she has some interesting tales of when she was going through her early years of medicine. So I'm excited to dive in, as she also is helping physicians in the space of burnout, perfectionism, and efficiency within the clinical day. So I really do think you're going to find some gems here today. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Like you said, my name is Penelope Hsu. I'm a pediatrician. I've been practicing, this is my 20th year, if you can believe that, which is frightening. But it does mean I've seen, anyone who's been at this game this long has seen the transformation of medicine and the amount of stress that has gone up. But I do currently work clinically part-time in an outpatient clinic. I do coach physicians as well. I have a side hustle as a physician coach and executive coach for physicians and medical leaders working on the things that you said. And then I also am a professional actor. So I do that sometimes too. So I have a bunch of different hustles, as they say. But honestly, that's been the key to me keeping my sanity.
Interesting. And that's what we're here to learn, is about that sustainability within medicine. So tell us then about the early years and how things were going within the medicine for you. We were talking a little bit before this interview about some of the things that happened to you. Tell us some more.
Yeah, well, so my story kind of starts even before medical school. I grew up, again, loving performing. I studied dance, I studied music, I played different, 4 different musical instruments. So I was always a performer, but I also always loved science, obviously. But when it was time to apply for colleges and things like that, it was pre-med all the way, right? I didn't have a choice. I often joke, like, my parents gave me 3 choices to pick a career. I could either become a doctor, a dentist, or a disappointment. And so I chose, and it's really true. And it's true for a lot of, children of immigrant parents, right? It's on you to make this sacrifice worth it, la da da. So, and how do you say no to that? So I went off to medical school, and I was still thinking I'd be able to audition, that I'd be able to still do something, and I couldn't. And it wrecked me. It really took a huge toll on my mental health. To the point where, yeah, after my first year, I was really depressed. And I decided to run away to LA for the summer and crash on my friends' couches and see what kind of acting gigs I could get just for the summer, just to have fun. I had a great time. I worked on music videos and student films and TV shows. I had a blast. And I came back to medical school totally revitalized, right? Like, felt like I recharged my batteries. But then I noticed that a bunch of my classmates, I'd say most of my classmates, were kind of tiptoeing around me and doing the shh kind of thing. And, when they would talk to me, they would be like, "How are you feeling? You're back, huh?" And I was like, "What is going on?" So I asked one of my classmates, and finally somebody told me that the rumor had gone around that after our first year, I had had a psychotic break. And in my psychosis, I thought I was an actor. And so I went to LA, and I had this huge psychotic episode where I was, crazy and going out and da 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 da. And now I was back, but was I still psychotic? Did I develop multiple personality disorder? Which one of me was back? And I was like, seriously? And that was my first lesson in sort of not fitting into the box, and having outside interests literally being seen as a sign of mental illness, which was devastating to me because I love to perform. And it shut me down completely. I had very few friends in med school. I tried not to say anything to anyone. And obviously that continued in residency. I tried not to say anything to anyone about how I was feeling. And that ultimately took its toll.
Yeah.
Because I wound up feeling like I was fighting myself. I was also mad at myself. Like, why can't I stop thinking about performing?
Mhm.
Like, you're a doctor, shut up. Like, you're so lucky. What is wrong with you? So there was a huge amount of imposter syndrome. Maybe I don't belong here, all that kind of stuff. And it actually really came to a head about halfway through my intern year. We're basically, long story short, I tried to kill myself.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
So yeah, so that was sort of my nadir. And I realized that night, that I had a choice, obviously,
Yeah.
and I could just kind of keep pushing myself in the direction that everybody else, thought was the right way, and literally push myself off a bridge. Or I would have to make some radical changes, and I did. But before all that, all of the med school was challenging for me, and I don't know if we want to go back to med school or go forward with that other story. I have
Well,
many stories.
I'm interested that you said that the medicine, you thought I'd have time to audition, I'd have time to do these other things within medicine, and I couldn't. Tell us more about the I couldn't. Was it that medicine was all consuming, or what was going on that made it not possible?
Yeah, one is I think I just misunderstood how far Syracuse was from New York City, because I was like, oh, it's upstate. I can still drive back for it's a 4.5, 5 hour drive, which
Mm.
you could do, and I
Yeah.
did do sometimes, but obviously that was not going to be sustainable or reasonable. But more than that, it really was the time. I mean, I clearly remember being in class all day, right, from like 8 to 5, and then I would go home, maybe go to the gym, eat something, and then I would study from like 8 to 2 or 3 in the morning, and then get up and do it again, like every single day.
Yeah.
So even, because Syracuse had a local theater community and all that kind of stuff, but I couldn't even get to an audition
Yeah.
or commit to a play
Yeah.
or anything. And so for me, medical school became all consuming. It really
Yeah.
did. And I didn't like it, but I wasn't smart enough to be able to just sort of breeze through everything. Like I had to pound those textbooks every single night to learn everything.
Yeah. And I think that's important to recognize that from the get-go, it felt like it was taking everything, including your passions and dreams and desires.
Oh, it was so
And then you come back from this amazing summer that you created for yourself, and you have this confrontation that your peers think that there's something unsound about you. And then you internalize it all your dreams and desires and passions all go inside of you. Wow. Like,
yeah.
did anyone know that you were this amazing, talented, want to perform, other person kind of trapped by this medicine beast at this time? Who knew? Who was following this? Did you have anyone on your inner circle?
I mean, my boyfriend at the time, knew, but he was in medical school too, right? He was my
Mhm.
classmate. We were just kind of struggling through it together. My family knew, but they were so fast. Again, like it was not an option. It just
Yeah.
wasn't an option. I remember both of my parents saying like, oh, just go to medical school now because it was so hard to get in back then. And you can be an actor when you're done. Just get all your training done now, and then you can do whatever you want with your time. And I bought into that too. So they all knew, but nobody encouraged it,
Yes.
so people knew about it, but they were just like, just squash it, like just keep going, you'll be
Okay.
fine.
So on
Yeah.
the external, you look like you've squashed it.
Yep.
This desire to be someone different. I find it interesting. I was talking to my husband recently, and he was telling me that Meredith Grey, who plays a doctor and has done for a long time, has earned way more money than most of us are ever going to see as doctors, as a non-doctor.
Right.
Like a screen
Right.
doctor. Like you, I think you were on the right path.
Oh, if only.
You could have been a doctor. You could have been Meredith Grey. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I did audition for Grey's Anatomy multiple times. I never got on the show though. Oh well.
No, dang it. How? Never mind. We'd be having a different conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. What was it about internship that created such, I don't know what, I don't even want to say the label it for you, but what created this moment that was clearly awful?
Um, well, I think honestly, just the number of hours, right? Like med school, most of the time you weren't on call, we
Mhm.
didn't, right? And ultimately in med school, nobody's looking at me to come up with the answer. I'm supposed to
Yeah.
be a scribe, and even that I screwed up sometimes. Um, but when you're in residency, then suddenly, you're the one writing the orders and you're the one that, people are calling. And so I think the added responsibility
Yeah.
really weighed on me because I was already uncertain, like, am I smart enough to be here? And now
Mm.
you want me to make the decision? Are you sure?
Got it.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's a good
Yeah.
idea. And then just the sheer number of hours. I mean, in New York, we did have protected hours,
Mhm.
but it still wound up being, I would say, probably 30 hours at a time when you were on call, which
Mhm.
isn't horrible, but it adds up every 4 nights, right? We were Q4.
It's horrible. It is horrible. Don't belittle it. It's awful. Like, even like I love that you're like, it was only 30 hours. I should have been able to handle that. No,
Yeah,
no, 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 no. Come on. There's human physiology in there.
yeah, right. That is true. That is very true. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, so all of that, and then obviously when you're post call, you're just sleeping. So
Yes.
it was just the number of hours. And again, I wasn't smart enough or efficient enough back then to be able to carve out time and space for anything else. So I think as all consuming as it was in med school, it literally swallowed me whole in internship. And then I think the third thing was like, I didn't see an end in sight.
Mm.
Because I knew that, I mean, granted, residency would end, but just being a doctor is always going to be very intensive. It's got to be face to face. You can't do anything virtual, um, or very little. Again, the responsibilities are going to be even more because now I'll be an attending. And I just saw like my whole life, being stuck in this on this path that just
Yes.
never felt like it was truly fulfilling. And I think
Mm.
that's the part that really almost kind of dashed my hopes, and like, this is it,
Yeah.
it'll get a little bit better, but this is what your life is going to look like, honey.
Yeah.
And the thought of that and just like never being able to get back to performing, on top of everything else, right? On top of the imposter syndrome, on top of the fatigue, it just felt like I couldn't keep the house of cards up anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand. So the performer, the person, or the other passions and things you were wanting to pursue, you saw zero ability to do that in any foreseeable future if medicine was going to be part of it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Who helped? What happened? How did you get out of that place into a place where you were able to carry on? Tell us
Yeah.
more.
My residency program director was great. I mean, he was a strict guy and he was, no nonsense, but when it came to this kind of stuff, he was awesome. So I had talked to him before even starting residency, trying to defer for a year because I like, just give me a year to
Yeah.
like go to LA, just let me have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And he would, no, the match is binding, blah blah blah. Anyway, but he already knew that I was having these doubts. And so when I came to him, and I never told him about what I call my bridge moment. Uh,
Hmm.
I never told him. I just told him, like, look, I can't do this. Like, I tried. I really tried. I'm literally dying.
Yeah.
And he was so lovely about it. He's like, look, I appreciate you trying. I do suggest you finish out the year. That way you can at least get your medical license and do something with that. So don't quit like, 7 months in or 8 months in, right? Just tough it out
Yeah.
to the end of the year, which made sense. Um, and he was very kind, he was like, take as much time as you need. There's always a spot for you if and when you want to come back. And I was adamant. I was like, I'm never coming back. I'm done, and he's like, okay, but if you ever do want to come back, there will be a spot. And so then I finished my intern year. I did spend a full year acting full time in New York, working on TV shows and plays, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was loving it, but I was having a hard time paying my student loans because
Ah.
they kick back in once you stop training. So all of my work as an extra, or tutoring English, like wasn't really cutting it. So I was working, a lot of odd jobs. And one of my jobs was I was temping at the Food Network, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like one of the administrative assistants, and we were in the research department. So we were collating the Nielsen data, who's watching, when they're watching, blah, blah, blah. So we would get all the Nielsen data every day, and I'd have to put it on like a PowerPoint and, update things and and show it to all of the advertisers. And every day, right before the Nielsen data came out, my boss would come out of her office and just say to the whole pod of us, and there's probably like 10 of us, this is life and death, people. This is life and death. Let's get on it because lives are on the line. This is life and death. Every day it was life and death, life and death, life and death. And then one day, I don't know what it was, but one day I actually just stopped and I was like, it actually isn't. it's it's people watching TV, and if there really was a life or death, instance that happens, I'm looking around the pod, I'm looking at my boss, I'm like, I think I might be the only one who would actually know what to do.
Mm.
And maybe that's actually a gift. And it was the first time that I saw medicine as a gift and not a burden.
Mm-hmm.
What it was about that day, or maybe it was the number of times she said it, or maybe I had had enough time away to develop that appreciation for what, because again, like putting together PowerPoints, a lifetime of that isn't exactly fulfilling either, So I was like, well, is this you know? And the more I thought about it, every day I'd go to work and every day I'd be like, yeah, like being able to save someone, particularly a child, like that's actually profound. Not everybody gets the privilege of doing that. Yes, it's a burden, but yet it's also an honor, right? It's also like literally a life-saving skill that not everybody can do. And so maybe I should be grateful for it. Maybe I should not like put away 8 years of training or whatever, to put PowerPoint presentations together necessarily. And so that was about 9 or 10 months after I had left. And I found myself calling my residency director. And I was like, hey. And he was like, I knew you'd be back. I was like, did you? Because I thought for sure I was done. And he's like, you're too good of a doctor to not have come back. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. So I came back. He created a spot for me. I came back as a second year. And I told him and my chiefs that like I would need time to perform. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, but I had to do it or else I would die. And so, on our outpatient months, sometimes we had like a call-free month. So then I could, maybe do a little project here and there. And then my third year, I think they took my call-free month and they put me in the ER like Monday through Thursday. And then I did a play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I did the ER Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday, and then a show Friday, Saturday, Sunday for like 6 weeks. And I was exhausted. I wound up with like a walking them. I was like coughing up blood by the end, but I had the time of my life. Like it was amazing. It was amazing. My attendings came, my co-residents came. I mean, it was so much fun. So I eventually had to figure out a way to kind of, carve out time and space for my passion. And it just took, I think, one, me advocating for myself, and then two, someone who was receptive to that, and flexible enough to sort of say, all right, let's make this work. It's a little bit unusual, but technically you have an ER month and technically you have a call-free month. So let's just push them all together, and that's that. And that sort of became the template for what I would do for the rest of my life. Um, I tend to work part-time. I don't work full-time because I know I need the flexibility and I need the days off to audition or to work on a play or now to coach. So yeah, it was kind of a really dark road, but at the end of it, I figured out the road that made sense for me.
Yeah. Now I hear a lot of doctors tell me that they go part-time, but then their days off are catching up on the days that they were working. So tell us about your navigation of that.
Yeah, I have learned to, and again, I'm speaking to the choir here, I've learned to become more efficient at charting.
Okay.
Uh, I do type well. Again, I was an administrative assistant for a long time, so I can type like 60, 70 words a minute. So I will type hopefully most of my note, or at least, a good amount of my note while I'm in the room with the patient, right? And so, and then I'm putting in the orders and I'm ordering everything. And, I try to do as much as I can when I'm in the patient room. So
Did
that,
that happen when you went back in second year residency, or was that before that, or when did this sort of come about for you?
yeah, I mean, honestly, that came about um, with the advent of EMR. Like, again, when I started training, we were still on paper charts. My first job was paper charts.
Okay.
And paper charts are so much easier, like I don't know how old you are, but
Yes, yes, and no, because you say that, but tell us again about this paper chart experience because you told me earlier, but I wanted the listeners to hear this because it is not a good story. It's not a good part of the story, but it's an important part of the story.
I think it's
The problem with paper charts. Okay,
the
take it
problem
away.
with paper charts. Yes, this is one problem with paper charts. I will agree. During medical school, I was on my one of my first clerkships was neurosurgery. And so we had to pre-round and I had to write the note and all that. And I thought I was being so smart. So I wrote my note in pencil so that I could change things when my resident came along and she wanted to fix things. I could just erase it. I thought I was so smart. So we started rounds and we're going room to room, the whole team down the hallway. And she got to my patient and I was very happy and proud. I opened up the chart. I said, here's my note. And she looked at it and she read it and she was like, you wrote this? And I was like, yeah. And she ripped it out of the binder and, crumpled it up into a paper and just threw it at my face. And she was like, no freaking pencil. And she used a different F word, yeah. And she's like, write it again. And so, I'm panicking, but I wrote it again. And, if she didn't like it, if it was not to her exact wording or the exact format that she wanted, if anything was off, she would just rip it out, crumple it up, and throw it in your face in front of everyone, right? In front of the nurses, in front of the patients, in front of everyone. And it was just a daily occurrence, because again, we were third year med students. What did we know, right? We didn't really know how to write a soap note yet or anything. So yeah, that was my very humbling experience with paper charts.
And that's what I mean. I mean, paper charts, you think, oh, it'll be so much easier. I can just handwrite. I know how to handwrite. I've been doing that my whole life. I can just do that in the chart. And
And then
right. So
you.
when you're doing ward rounds, for instance, your note goes in chronological order. So if you don't get the note done within the round or in real time, others have come and charted, and then you're like charting out of order.
Right.
And then you have to decide how much you're going to chart and how thorough you're going to be and how many pages you're going to take up because it's just blank paper. There's no template here and there's no shortcut. If you want to write it, you got to write it all. Like it was good and bad.
Yeah.
My experience in internship, which in Australia we surgery was my first
Oh.
term out of the blocks. Here we go. We're going to be a surgeon. Get taken down to the dictation room. Here's a pile at least 2.5 feet tall of files that the last person had left for me to do
Oh,
the discharge summary. I'm like, I'm loving these dictations. I'm loving this, whole paper chart, discharge summary thing.
right.
Not at
Right.
all. So,
That's
so while some of us would like to say that paper charts were good, you're clearly having an experience where they were not good. And
no.
and this whole ability for this surgeon to pull it out of the chart, rip it up, and throw it in your face with cursives,
Mhm, mhm.
that would have had to have been confronting.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely humiliating, right?
Mm.
But again, like I trained during a time where like that's part of your medical school education, right? You're the lowest man on the totem pole, you're the scut monkey, you're gonna get me coffee, you're gonna, like that was all just part of the job. And at least it wasn't just, I mean, it was me that first day, which was horrible, but it did happen to other people too. So I didn't feel like it was just me. Not that that makes it better, but maybe it made it a little better. But yeah, I mean, it was obviously humiliating, but at the same time, I was just like, well, this is par for the course. Like, this is just what training is, people are just going to be demeaning and rude, and that's that. I didn't,
Mm.
I didn't think it should have been any better. Yeah, I didn't have that idea in
Did
my
you
head
have any of those type of experiences within acting or performing?
of
That
being,
level of personal critique?
well, I'm trying to think. I don't think I have per se.
Okay. So I
Um,
can
but
like,
I,
well,
you
you're
did,
like, I didn't question it. It's just how it had to be. But I'm like, but you were at work. And when you're at your other work, it never happened. They
yeah.
weren't ever like that to you.
Well, one big thing that the acting world has that physicians anyway don't have is a union. And so there are certain protections that you get, right? Like you can't do that. You'll be written up by the union. Like there is a code of conduct. There are rules. There's only a certain number of hours you can work, and you have to be given a certain number of meals, and they have to be this long. So I remember as a resident thinking, it would be really nice if we had a union, but that has never come to pass, at least
Or
not
a
here.
code of conduct. I'm sure we have a code of conduct somewhere. Some sort of professional guidance on how we should behave in front of, our junior colleagues.
I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So fascinating. The comparison, because you've got a comparison.
Yeah.
You're
That,
looking at what union work looks like, how to interact with co-workers on one hand versus the experience that you're having within medical school on the other. Okay. All right. So you said you went into the room and you were typing within the EMR in the room, but was that what you were being shown? Is that what was demonstrated to you by others?
no.
Okay.
Um, Again, like I trained in the era of paper charts, so none of my attendings, use an EMR. And then as it started to, slowly be rolled out, again, I'm so old that like I've seen the advent of an EMR, so everybody was figuring it out together. I don't think anybody started off very efficient at it. And then you just have to kind of figure out what works for you, right? For some people, they would rather do it, see the patient, leave the room, and then write it all up. Um, and then some would just sort of like collect them all until the end of the day and then try to chart. My memory is terrible as it relates to that. I can remember my lines and stuff, but like 5 minutes after I leave the room, I'm like, I don't know what that patient's name was. I have no idea which ear was it. So I just learned really quickly that like I can't remember things that well at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
so I just kind of figured out like, okay, then at least let me jot some notes down while I'm in the room processing.
Mhm.
Um, and, the other thing that I do is I sort of talk through my note sort of
Mhm.
as I'm going, like, so I'll be just typing. I'm like, okay, so it was that right ear, right, mom? Yeah, it was the right ear that was infected. Okay. And so we're going to send some amoxicillin and, and then we're going to have you come back, and I'm typing it as I'm talking to them, giving them the plan.
Mhm.
Even the history, sometimes I'll be like, was it 2 days of fever, mom, or 3 days of fever? Oh, 3 days. Okay, great. Let me put in 3 days, so
Mhm.
that's what I do to kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if it makes it feel less awkward. To me, it makes it feel less awkward rather than just me sort of like, typing and not looking at them at all. And it's also a good way for me to kind of remind myself and clarify, was it 2 days or 3 days, and which
Mhm.
pharmacy is it? And so I have found that like that is just what has worked for me, is to do as much as I can in the room, and then afterwards fill in the blanks, and click all the other boxes that you have to click, and do the billing and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. So right now with this, well, when you were doing the half and half, That was within the emergency department. But the days off, how did you continue to protect your days off so that you could have these other priorities?
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of the ER, right? And shift work in general is when you're done, you're done. You don't take call and you have to finish all your charts by the end of the shift. And so like that was my first job out of residency. And so that's kind of the mindset that I was sort of again trained in, is like you finish your charts before you go. I mean, obviously. Um, and you stay if you need to stay to fix them, but like your charts have to be done by the end of the shift. Um, so that's always sort of been the way that I practice, even when I eventually transitioned into, like more of an outpatient, setting. In my mind, I have to have all my charts done by the end of the night. Like that's just what it
Mhm.
is. Um, I do have the luxury of not having kids, or a partner right now. So it's okay if I stay a half hour later at the end of the day. I tend to also start my day about 30 to 40 minutes before my first patient, so that
Mhm.
I can kind of catch up if I needed to. I can finish, notes from the day before or call patients, whatever. So I kind of build into my day, even though my clinical hours may be 9 to 7, my day is really 8:30 to 7:30,
Mhm.
and I just know that that's my work day. And if I give myself enough time on my work days, then I should have plenty of time on my days off. And I work really hard to make sure that I do that. So, it is a mental priority thing, right? Like just, it's a hard border. I don't do
Mhm.
work at home. I don't do
Mhm.
work on the weekends unless it is an extraordinary circumstance, but otherwise I just won't do it. I would rather stay at work later. Now,
Mhm.
again, I have clients, and I'm sure you do too, who can't do that, right? They've got to be home to pick up their kid, like there is
Yeah.
no staying late, right? So that's what sort of when I try to find them more efficiency hacks during the day, so that we're not doing it on Sunday. We're not going part-time and spending the whole day charting. Like that's not okay. So it really is kind of getting into this like mindset of like, one, this can be done.
Yeah.
Two, I can do it. And
Yeah.
three, like, I'm gonna figure this out. Like, there's gotta be a way for me to do it, I think a lot of the clients that I work with, and I don't know about for you, but especially if they've been practicing a long time, they have this like defeatist attitude of like, oh, it's just the way it is. Like, you just work on the weekends, yeah, I just take my laptop with me on vacation. It's okay. I'm like, it's not.
No, it's not. I agree. No, it's not okay. But that was the lesson. That was the information being given to us if we asked how are we supposed to do this.
Yeah.
That was the way. That was all we could think about, was how it's done. So that's how we'll do it. Rather than, but that's not okay with me.
Yeah, right, right.
Talk to me about the eloquence versus relevance in
Mm.
regards to charting.
Um, I use that phrase a lot.
Yeah.
I think I think there are some of us who, again, we are perfectionists. We want the note to look perfect and sound perfect and be perfect. And so I have had clients who refuse to use any templates in the EMR, refuse to use like those dot phrases or quick text that can just sort of auto populate a certain phrasing that you use. They had to write out everything kind of like a paper chart, like a blank
Mhm.
page, just me putting in everything, because every patient is unique and every patient's story is different and every plan is individualized. And I was like, well, that's going to kill you. And she was spending like 4 hours a night charting,
Mhm.
And so what I often say is, we have to remember what the note is for, right? The medical note, at least where I practice in the States, really only serves three purposes. And one is to justify your billing. What did you
Mhm.
do? Two is continuity of care, to make
Mhm.
sure that somebody else who picks up the chart will know what was going on and what they should do next. And then medical legally, is it gonna cover, again, justify your actions? There is no extra prize for like extra words. There's no extra prize for semicolons and like really nice, like I had one client who had to like have bullet points exactly lined up, and if they weren't lined up, she had to go back and line them up. You don't get extra points for that. You don't get to bill higher for that. And so I try to remind people like just what's relevant. If you want to write eloquently, that's great. Take a creative writing class, write a novel on your free time, but do not do it in the medical chart. Because the other thing is, and I kind of pose it this way to them, like, how do you feel when you see a 3 pages long note? That's all pointed and perfectly indented, but it just goes on and on and on. I was like, do you actually read those notes? And without question, everyone's like, no, you just jump to the assessment and plan, right? You just need to know what to do and maybe the history. And so then why are we writing these long, novels that we wouldn't read ourselves, So like, who are we doing it for? We're not doing it for anyone. So yeah, so just keeping it relevant, not necessarily eloquent, right? I've been told that it's okay to not even have it in full sentences, right? It's okay if your note is in bullet points, so long as it makes sense and somebody would be able to figure out what you meant. Again, grammar is less important. Spelling, again, if, as long as someone can put together what you were trying to say, I often joke with my clients, like, for whatever reason, my brain always types brain as Brian. And
Yes.
I, for years now, and I used to go back and correct it. And now I just leave it, because I'm like, if somebody sees they had a Brian bleed, I think they're going to be able to put together that I meant a brain bleed, like there was no hemorrhage in the Brian. I think they're going to get it. So, even things like that, which again, to some folks, if you're a real perfectionist, you're like, oh, I can't have a spelling mistake. But again, just the relevant facts, just the facts. We don't win any extra prizes for the flowery language or the indentation. So that's definitely something I practice and I preach. Relevance, not eloquence.
Yeah.
It's not
I'm,
gonna save you in a
I'm going to
court.
take your example from back in medical school, and you're a neurosurgeon who would pull out that page and screw it up and throw it at you with oblitives. Those interactions, those moments can change our brain chemistry and create some going forward habits. And I'm so impressed or surprised that your eloquence didn't, or perfectionist about these notes didn't follow you after that experience. Because I'm like, that would have been a pretty profound, if you hadn't seen her do that to somebody else before, which it sounds like you hadn't, that would have left an impression.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think for her, obviously my notes were perfect. And in medical school, my notes were perfect. But then again, when you become an attending, it's a different game altogether, and I often feel like our training doesn't actually prepare us for the real world. Most of us don't go into the outpatient setting, right? Most of us go into most of us don't go into the inpatient setting. We stay on the outpatient, wherein you're supposed to churn through 25, 30 patients a day. There's no
Mhm.
way you can do that perfectly, and I think
Well,
it
you
was.
can, but at the expense of your sleep or your weekends. And we have physicians who go decades of giving up their sleep and their weekends for the pursuit of this eloquence. And it's so important to just have that understanding that there's others in the world who are like you. And it doesn't have to be that way. If you want your time back, if you want to pursue your passions and dreams and your other little hidden talent, let her out. You can.
Right. Yeah, and I think that really was the driver, right? Like again, I couldn't just chart on the weekends because I'd be auditioning or I'd be in a play on the weekend. So I
Yeah.
didn't have the weekend to catch up,
Yeah.
and I didn't have weeknights to catch up. So I had to figure it out really quick because I did have, the outside passion that did take up a good amount of time. It's not like, well, not to say that, but when you're on a project, it's like 12-hour days, you're rehearsing 3 nights a
Yeah.
week. So I really didn't have the time to do it any other way than to figure out how to do it day of.
And I love that. I love that you had an external force that created a moment in your brain that said, I have to do this differently.
Yeah.
And we may, each of us probably have that different experience of what that was that may have finally prompted us. Like I've got a lot of physicians who come to me as they're coming back from mat leave going, I can't do it the way I did it before. I have a little person that I want to get home to. And then you're saying, I have a project. It's going to take me 12 hours and 3 nights. And I literally don't have the time to spend on this other
Yeah,
part of me. I
right.
want to pursue this other thing. It's important and fascinating that if the circumstances line up, sometimes we decide this is our moment to figure it out.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And thank goodness.
Or we go and exhaust ourselves completely
Yeah.
trying to do it the same way.
Right. And then eventually you wind up working with either you or me anyway, right? Because nothing else is going to happen. I mean, I had a
We get
client.
broken. Otherwise, you're broken.
Exactly. Exactly. Whether it be, I've seen clients develop panic attacks or syncope, yeah,
Yeah.
some way or another. It
Yeah.
does.
Our human physiology will catch up with us.
Right. Right. And then we have to learn how to do things
And
differently. So yeah, I mean, I
we have
think
to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is so important, right? Giving people these tools like right out of the gate, as often as you can and as quickly as you can right out of training, right? Don't wait 10 years. I think if we can tool up like the next generation of docs, to be that kind of efficient, relevant, not eloquent right from the get-go and kind of toss away the perfectionism quickly, then I think they'll be better off than our generation who are trying to figure it out, and going
Ground a
through.
little first.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
got to put out first. Yeah.
Where do people find you if they're wanting to learn more or work with you?
Oh, thank you. My website is just my full name, so it's Dr. Penelope Hsu. So that's Dr. Dr. Penelope PENELOPEHSU.com. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Beautiful. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
I think the other big thing is another mantra of mine is to look for the and versus the or.
Mm,
And so for me, it was learning how to figure out a way to perform and be a doctor
mm,
rather than just having that binary choice of either or. They can't possibly cross over. No, no, no. It's, black or white. And again, I think sometimes our perfectionist tendencies kind of get that way, right? It's either perfect or it's crap, and there's
mm.
nothing in between. And so just kind of looking for the and of it, how do we make them come together? How do we, have it be, a very good note, right? That's clinically relevant, but also efficient and short. How do you become, an actor and a doctor? How do you open up a bakery and run your private practice? And let's talk about that versus coaching people through like, oh, I just have to give up my dreams. Oh, it's been like this forever. So I always like to tell people like there probably is a way to do it, to find the and. It's going to look different. It's going to be
Mm,
outside the box. It's going to be
mhm.
challenging. Nobody else is going to have done it before. Doesn't mean it can't be done,
Yeah.
you know? And so I think that has sort of been the mantra that I've lived my life by. Like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make a way, damn it.
Yeah.
And I think you can do that for a lot of things. I think there is a way to create a life of and versus or.
Yeah. And we're big about that around here as well, because I think sustainability in medicine is going to look like you get to have your dreams or priorities or life outside of medicine. Like, I think that's so much important with regards to sustainability is having the option of doing something outside of this. And it doesn't have to be a side gig or a career or a specific be an actor, actress,
Right.
but it's that ability to have a life. And it's
Yes.
not this hopeless, all-consuming, taking up every waking minute
Taking your
experience.
laptop on vacation. Yeah, right. Just to have a life, just to, sleep in
Yeah.
and, make breakfast for your kids.
Mhm.
Like even that is qualifies, right? As an and, like you get to be a doctor and,
Yes.
cook kids meals and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, and I think you said fulfillment. I didn't have a fulfilling life when it was all consuming. I think that's So important to recognize. You were talking a bit about patient communication, that what happens in the room, and how you navigate that is important too with regards to efficiency within the clinical day. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Like I said, I use the visit as an opportunity to write my note. So similarly to like if you were dictating, I guess, right? You're kind of like talking through the note as you're typing it. So that is definitely something I do. I also do probably spend more time than than maybe I should in explaining things to the patient so that they don't hit me up in the portal or call my nurse 3 times or come back the next day, right? Like I try to kind of, like I said, I try to do as much in the room as I can. I try to chart as much as I can. I try to teach as much as I can in the room so that I don't have messages just rolling in. So I think that is another thing that's really important. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of what I mean, and then communication just with other team members too.
Mhm.
I think part of what burns us out is we feel like we have to be the one to call the patient and we have to be the one to call in the refill, and it really doesn't have to be you all the time, and so sort of delegating out a little bit, but
Yeah.
having a good enough rapport where again you're not making your staff feel like the scut monkey or you're just the low man on the totem pole so you have to do what I say, but really developing like this team attitude of like, we all take care of the patient and,
Mhm.
you're an integral part of this team too. And, I think you're capable of calling these folks and telling them this and really nurturing that work environment too, right? To be warm and happy so that sustains you too, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
so I think it's so multifaceted, right? We got to train our patients well so that they don't kind of keep bugging us after hours, and we have to sort of develop a work culture that revolves around good open communication, wherein we develop that sort of let's help each other out mentality to just make the day feel better. And I
Yeah.
think it's also key to the sustainability.
Yeah. And tell us one of the fun acting roles that you've had. It doesn't have to be your favorite, just somewhere where you had like fun. So I'm sure a lot of people listening here have never acted. So kind of
Right.
curious, what have you done that you've loved doing?
Well, so during COVID,
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of live theater, but we developed this thing called Zoom theater, right? Where
Uh-huh.
it would be a Zoom meeting and people would sort of act out their parts. So I was part of a Zoom play, um, wherein I got to play a dinosaur. It was basically a skit or a play where the dinosaurs are at this like council meeting and they're trying to decide what to do because the meteor is coming and so I had to do my hair crazy and I had to get a green screen and they put like pterodactyls flying behind me like lava flowing. It was crazy, but it was really fun. I got to be
Yeah.
a dinosaur.
Wow, that's so fun. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on and giving us this amazing life experience that you've had. Not always fun, obviously, but it's so important to have this like dual person.
Yeah.
Like that's so much fun.
Yeah, that's not multiple personalities,
Not
right?
multiple personalities,
It's
just
psychotic.
enjoying your passions and dreams and finding a little fulfillment in medicine. It's so fun. Thank you so much, Penelope, for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you so much.
If you are here and you are a resident, I want to remind you that we have a program called the Smarter Charting Program, which is there to help you as you navigate these changing workplaces, changing work flow or amount of work that you're doing, the different preceptors you're working for, and their different expectations, patient expectations. Smarter Charting Program is our program that's been running for clinicians, and now we're accepting residents into that as well, because a lot of what you're working through in those years as a resident we understand as preceptors the types of things that you are dealing with, and we would love to be able to help you. Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the Premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.